The next speaker is curator of contemporary design here at Cooper-Hewitt National Design Museum, and she's an author of numerous books and articles on design. So please welcome Ellen Lupton.
Thank you. Hi. So I'm going to talk about reading, and I'm going to talk about design more from the perspective of the user. I'm a curator and a writer and an educator, so I won't be showing you things that I made, but more observations of the world, and specifically the world of the book and the page as it is evolving in front of us. And we used to think of the reader, when that word came to mind, you would think of a lady of leisure sitting on a sun-speckled park bench somewhere. But now we tend to think of machines and pieces of software. So the word reader often refers not to a person, but actually to a product. So I'm a writer, and I'm very interested in stories, and so I've been trying to think about how to talk about design in a narrative way. So my little talk here is presented in two chapters, each of which is a work of fiction, and the first one is science fiction, and I call it Jurassic Book. And of course, the book is a very fragile object right now, constantly on the verge of extinction and disappearing, but of course also evolution and survival. And I thank my kids for doing this excellent illustration of the dying book. And so here's the story, right? The story we tell ourselves about the life and death of books, that a long, long time ago, books ruled the earth. And the big books would eat little books. And then their native habitat was threatened by a giant meteorite. And I'll show you a scan inside that meteorite so you can see all the terrible threats that hit the book and destroyed the place where books flourished, the bookstore. And so zillions of books perished and sank into the earth, right? Became skeletons and fossils and so forth. But some evolved and became these wonderful little monsters like this, the electronic readers that many of us now consume our books upon. And as a consumer of these digital books, it's been fun to kind of follow this over the last 2 or 3 years and to kind of experience the change of the book from the inside, right? And so we can all actually watch this happen and actually be self-conscious and kind of examine our own process of reading and writing, right, for these new digital media. So something like the e-reader that comes with the iPad is all about purity of experience, about creating a digital book that looks as much as possible like the old paper books, right down to the animated page turn and traditional typography. And the whole experience of the object actually enforces the sense of purity. And this is a great quote by the interface designer Oliver Reichenstein, talking about the way the iPad creates this frame that sort of holds the reader in place, right? And it emphasizes that purity of experience and the sense of being in the literature, right? And in contrast to that, you have something like Google Books, which is about impurity of experience. And when I ask my graduate students, hey, has anybody ever read a Google book? They shake their heads in disgust and talk about how beautiful paper is and so forth. And but then when I say, have you ever used a Google book? The answer is very different, because Google Books are all about a different experience of reading that is not about immersion and being trapped in one place, but is all about search, right? It's all about the very hungry an acquisitive act of research, which is not leisure, but effort and work, a kind of harvesting of the world. And so that experience is not pure, but is surrounded by stuff, right? By ads and interfaces and links and invitations to go elsewhere. And it's all about a much more restless experience. And of course, when we read the news on a website like New York Times online, that's also a very impure experience, one that's constantly reminding you of what the New York Times thinks your age and demographic is, right? I must be very old and very rich if I am reading the New York Times and now actually paying to read it. So it certainly gives you a constant reminder of who you're supposed to be, right? And so lots of software and applications exist to kind of purify that experience, to take away everything that's extra, that's not part of the text. So this is the application Readability, which is a read later application that allows you to collect these things and then read them with no ads and no interface in the future, in some clean and undistracted future. You'll go back and read all these things purely. And then there are designers doing more experimental things, which are about moving away from that notion of the pure, but offering a different kind of experience as it aggregates the news. So this is by Jonathan Puckey, and it's a newsreader that takes all the headlines from Fox News and presents them in a way that shows the history of their editing. So that you actually see the news as something that was changed and altered over time. So an impure experience. I'm going to show a couple of things that some of my graduate students at MICA, Maryland Institute College of Art, where I'm director of the graphic design MFA program. These are some projects they did with Eric Gunther, where they were asked to think about readers and to think about new ways that people can read. So these are some prototypes. So what if you took that pinch and spread function on an iPad, and when you did it, the text didn't get bigger, it actually opened up a space there where you could see references to other material. Or what if you could have a kind of directionality to the text instead of a continuous stream, continuous linear stream? Or what about having a kind of micro model of the text next to the page that you're reading in? I think a lot of us reading on these kind of devices feel kind of lost in the linearity of it, and being able to see a kind of map of the entire book would help people to orient themselves. There's a bit of a more radical idea. It's called Thomas, and it's a concept for a reader inspired by Thomas Jefferson, who had an idea of publishing an edition of the Bible, the New Testament, that would strip out all of the mystical events and only leave the moral and ethical teachings of Jesus. And so it would take away the magic and leave in place a kind of Enlightenment, rational document about equality and justice and so forth. So my student Eric Mortensen, he imagined, well, what if you could have an e-reader filter that would strip away the mysticism from anything that you might read in the New York Times or anywhere else, and only give you the kind of rational facts. So here's a little kind of set of screen grabs showing how that might work. There's Thomas with his scissors. And it would, highlight, it would go in there and find the mystical pieces and highlight them, and then animate the process of them falling away and disappearing, right, in this kind of reference to the old world of paper, and leave you there with this purified text. Something for the future. My second story, and this is where I'll end, is a love story. And it's a true story, and I narrate it from pretty much from experience, and it's called I Hate My Kindle, a love story. So here's how this story goes. Girl meets Kindle. She loves her Kindle. She's very excited, very thrilled to be able to carry 1,000 books in her Coach bag. It's a very thrilling event. She feels attached, excited, enlarged, and all of that. She's very excited that she can take her Kindle to the beach like a real book, because it's printed with this electronic ink, and so it reflects. And unlike trying to read your shitty little iPhone on the beach, you can actually read anything, right? It's very exciting. So she feels very, very excited, and best of all, she has fun with her Kindle. You always know that your relationship is in big trouble when you say, I have so much fun with you, right? And in fact, people do apparently, it's been scientifically proven that people have more fun reading on their electronic readers. Jacob Nielsen did a study with about 30 people who proved that they had more fun reading on their Kindles or their Sony e-readers. I think it's important to note that what they were reading was stories by Ernest Hemingway, and there's probably no prose on earth more suited to the linear experience of a Kindle than a story by Ernest Hemingway. Well, then something terrible happens. Girl meets iPad. An iPad is a little bit of a different companion than Kindle. She can touch him. And when she touches his skin, he responds, does things, right? So instead of all those buttons and keypads and the little 5-way controller and all of that nonsense, here's this object that responds to her touch. So now every time she sees her Kindle, she tries to touch his screen. It seems like the natural thing to do, but he just lies there. Nothing happens. And she realizes that she can take her iPad to bed, and with the lights off, she can still read her book because he illuminates from within. And she realizes she'd really rather go to bed with iPad than go to the beach with Kindle, because who really goes to the beach, But all things come to an end, and soon even this love starts to turn sour because her friend Sally gets iPad too, and he's thinner, lighter, and he has FaceTime, so he can actually speak to her and even occasionally listen. And here she discovers perhaps she has found her ideal mate. But she thinks of the future, and she wonders, well, perhaps iPad 2 will be superseded by iPad 3 and 4 and 5, and what will happen in this ever-changing and ever-improving world of the book. And so she has to come to a really basic understanding about herself, and this is that great turning point in any work of fiction where she comes to accept who she really is. Okay. Thank you very much.
Oh, hi, that was magnificent. Is there an app that can help me finish a book? That's what I want.
That would be your
reading
wife.
is becoming, reading is becoming a little hard for me, and so I don't finish anything anymore. So when are these going to help me finish a book?
Well, in all honesty, that's a whole area, is writing better word processors. So Oliver Reichenstein, who I quoted earlier, actually has a program for the iPad called IA Writer, which is supposedly the perfect tool for writing because it shuts out the entire world and you can't change the font. And apparently this is the key to your problem. I've tried it, and I'm actually someone that likes to write in busy cafes, and I want to be distracted. I want constant access to food and media while I'm writing. So for me, it's not ideal, but maybe it will help you.
I mean, finish reading a book.
Oh, I thought you meant writing it. Jamer, really, you need to write it.
We have one more question here.
You didn't actually talk about the future of the paper book and how that might be changing. I wonder if you could comment on that.
Well, I think a lot of that has to do with changes in the publishing industry, and writers becoming more connected to readers and having more opportunity to create books within a digital environment. So collaborative books, short-run books, print on demand, direct-to-consumer marketing of books. These are all ways that the physical book is changing in the digital world. And despite all our hand-wringing about the death of literature and paper, we're actually seeing a huge renaissance in book publishing, including among the extremely young, people under 30, who are really into books. The funny thing is they seem to be more into making the books than reading them. And so I think that books have become a kind of social medium that's more about exchange and identity and brand and self-expression and less about reading. So maybe that remains for the future.
Yeah. I also have one question. You keep saying books all the time. Will books live or will they die, as you talked before, as a word? Because, I mean, the iPhone is not a telephone, or is it? Or is it something else? But you see that on the digital...
Well, a book is a type of intellectual work. And it's not a particular artifact, but it's a type of endeavor. You know, so Marshall McLuhan said the medium is the message. That's no longer true. The message is the message. And the book lives in these different formats, so you can read the thing on any device that you have. So I think that the book will continue to exist as a type of work, but it will become more changeable, more social, more embedded in the world of readers, I think. Okay, thanks.
Okay, thanks a lot. Let's give her a big hand.